Coming up on today's episode, we got a new indestructible lithium-ion battery that's being worked out. Tesla has a rendering of a new Chinese car, possibly, and Tim is somewhere. We'll find out. Let's get ludicrous. Hey there, and welcome to Our Ludicrous Future. This is the podcast where we talk about all the cool future stuff that's happening right now that's going to make tomorrow a totally ludicrous. I'm Joe Scott with the Answers to Joe YouTube channel. With me is Ben Solons.
Hey guys, it's Ben Solons from Teslanomics. And did you know that today is the 4-year anniversary of me getting my first Tesla?
Yeah? Was that Tez or Electra?
Electra. Yeah. Which, you know, not a unique name for an electric car. But if you grew up when I did, there was a certain celebrity with the last name of that we all had crushes on. So, you know, you get to live out these fantasies when you get older. And so that's the thing.
Couldn't just name it Carmen?
Yeah, that would have been better. You're right. But the thing about that is my wife just sent me the picture from our delivery event. Or from our delivery of it, and it's just so different now. It's so crazy. First off, that this is my job, but also that like how that company has grown and changed in these 4 years. Like when we picked up our car, it was used, but we still got the full treatment. Like, and it was a small area. We were the only one picking up our car that day. They had a giant bow on it. We had like an hour or change to go through it with a specialist and explain everything and set up our phones and let's do all this and okay, here's how this works and here's how that works. And I remember leaving there just in awe of like, I could never buy a car at a dealership ever. Like it just wouldn't. After you go through that, you're like, yes, this is how it's supposed to be. And now I know. Maybe some people listening are like, it's terrible. Like they've had a bad experience with the delivery now, but it's just so wild to see, you know, how from where that was then to where it is now. And just kind of crazy.
Well, I mean, everything about the buying process is different. There's not like the haggling and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, I don't remember my delivery experience being bad. It was kind of rushed, but it was okay, you know.
The paperwork on your side was the hard part, right?
Yeah. Everything leading up to it was the frustration. But
and I remember mine was like at the time for the first one was like, yeah, just bring a check. You're good. That's it. And so rolled in did they ask for insurance? I don't know if they even did. But yeah, you know, went to my bank, got a loan, and then the way that works is, you know, they gave me like a cashier or a whatever certified funds check from the bank. Wrote it out to him, signed 2 DMV things, and that was it. It was like just wow, you know. So
was that an S?
Yeah, it was a 2013 Model S. It was in 2016 when I got it. So it was a 2013 Model S, and it was 10,000 miles on it. It was a 60. No rear wheel drive, no autopilot, none of that fancy stuff. It did have like at the time a lot of the upgrades though. So it had like leather and it had like the tech package and the good sound system and blah, 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 like all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty decked out. The biggest mistake I feel like I made looking back was that we focused on things like the color and like, like leather interior. Like we wanted, you know, a certain like kind of the typical things you would look for in a car. We were really focused on. But looking back, the only thing we should have cared about was battery at the time. And autopilot would have been nice, but it was 4 years ago. It like autopilot 1 was still very much like, you know, in kind of the one you wanted. So anyways, it was a thing. So just kind of crazy to look back. It doesn't seem that long ago, but like looking at my life then versus now, it's like completely different.
So that was the S, and then you got the 3 and then the X.
And then now the X. Yep. Yeah. And then coming soon, maybe the Model Y. And
you definitely gonna get one?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, did you reserve one?
Yep. And we are at the event I did. And this is going to be Jenny's perfect Tesla. This is going to be the Model 3, which she loves. She drives every day. but it's missing a hatchback. And well, until we upgraded it, it was missing the power lift gate. But it has that now. So yeah, so those are the two things that she really wants. And we're hoping to get that soon-ish. I think it's going to be June, honestly, before we see any deliveries. I know you see a lot of things out there, people. And in fact, we recently had a sighting of one that was a Model Y prototype. And it is sitting next to a Model 3 and a Model X in this photo. So you can kind of see. I don't know why I can't scroll appropriately.
That's good context right there, though. Actually, I wish it was in between the 3 and the X, because it is kind of in between the 3 and the X size-wise.
Yeah, and also the way how cameras work. This one, because it's closer to you, it's going to look a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Than it probably is.
So are they all going to be Chrome delete like that?
Yeah, that's the default.
I kind of like that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, I used to make fun of Chrome deletes because to me it was looked like a Prius. Like most cars are Chrome deleted because Chrome is expensive and hard to maintain or whatever. So it's easier just to have a black piece of plastic than it is a piece of Chrome or something that looks like Chrome. But yeah, it looks clean, doesn't it? See, I think it's a little bit of a misnomer here. In this photo, it looks like it's bigger than the X.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's. I mean, I don't know. I have an X. I've been in the Y. The Y seemed much smaller, bigger than the 3, but it's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be the perfect balance, the perfect family car. 2 kids, hatchback, all that kind of stuff. So I think this car is going to sell a lot.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
That's what you said.
That's what I said. Are you going to order one?
Too.
Probably not, right?
Nah, probably not.
Yeah.
It's funny how I don't know. I love my car and everything, and I'm probably at a place now where if I wanted to get a new one, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But I don't know. I tend to cars and stick with them for a while. I'm not somebody that bounces around unless my needs change, which it has not seemed to change.
Yeah. Now these wheels on this one here in this photo are the I believe they're just the Sonic Carbon wheels from the Model 3 prototype that we saw at the Model 3 unveiling. I don't know, what, 3 years ago or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know what of this is going to make it to production, but they're out there.
He's just parked in the middle of the street. What's going on here?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look. It does look
broken down or something.
It does kind of look like that. How are these? Yeah, it doesn't say. So a link from Electrek here, so you guys want to go check that out. We'll put the link in the description as well. Oh man, yeah, it doesn't really say California, West Coast, and then of course we saw one at Kennedy Space Center recently, or someone driving around Kennedy Space Center in one. So, and is that where Tim is going?
Oh yeah, we should probably say something about that. Yeah, so Tim is not with us today. He's going out to see the SpaceX in-flight abort test, which probably will be quite a show because they're going to totally blow up the booster, which we never get to see, which is a good thing. But let's face it, we all kind of want to see it.
We always want to see the train wreck, don't we?
Yeah. So it's scheduled, I believe, for the 18th, which is just a couple days away. So if you're listening to this or watching this, I guess it's supposed to be tomorrow-ish, assuming it's on time. But yeah, so Tim is on his way out there, so he couldn't be with us today, but he's going to record a little something. We'll stitch it in here later, and I don't know what he's going to talk about, but he'll talk about something. I don't know. We'll see.
Yes. So while he does that,
let's talk about this Chinese design render thing.
Yeah. Okay. So in addition to, Model Y stuff happening, we have a potential new model of Tesla from China. And this is an image that was released in a job announcement or like job posting. And we have it here on the screen. If you guys are just listening, I'll try to describe it. But imagine the front is very Model 3-like. And the back is very, very sharp, slopey hatchback style. And it appears like it would only be a 2-door. So kind of imagine a
Doesn't look like it
scrunch.
has doors at all.
Yeah, well, it's just a quick drawing here, but this isn't like someone that just made this up. This actually comes to us from this job posting or flyer for the Chinese Gigafactory. So this isn't, so this is official from Tesla. And Elon had previously mentioned this, I don't know, a year or so ago, talking about they could see making a more compact, smaller, and cheaper Tesla. More of like, the city car. Imagine like a little Fiat 500 or maybe a Mini Cooper size car, one of those kind of things. And that's kind of what this looks like. So very Model 3-esque in its design, but, much, much smaller. Two-door, you would imagine. And Elon even had a tweet, a quote. He had a quote saying that it would be super cool. And so we're going to do it. We're going to try to do it. Official words from Elon there about this car. Much longer than that. We'll put a link to the description on the Electrek article, but kind of crazy. What do you think? Do you think this could be a thing?
Well, so maybe we're thinking of the same thing here, but I think when he was talking to Marquez, he said something about a $25,000 Tesla, possibly in the future. Do you think that's what this could be?
I imagine it would be. Yeah. 25.
And it's a worldwide market. It's not just for China.
Right. This would be, according to this. So Tesla, what they're actually doing, how this came about, is they are planning to build a design studio, an R&D center in China, in order to build, cars like this one, like new cars that are designed in China, versus, right now they're all designed in LA, at where SpaceX is. So yeah, but the idea would be this could be available worldwide, or probably where it makes sense. Like, I don't know, in the US, I'm sure it would sell because it'd be cheap. But, with tariffs and all that, and then who knows? Let's say this is 4 or 5 years down the road. Who knows what the geopolitical environment will be like, what the economic environment will be like. So who even knows what markets, or if it would come to the US because of those things. But, in theory, it could go anywhere. So, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm a little mixed.
So here's my question. Let's just say this was the $25,000 thing. What price point do you think a Tesla would need to sell at before people finally drop the whole "it's a luxury car brand" thing? Because I mean, like there's been math done already to show that a kind of base Model 3, after the cost of maintenance and gas and everything, is about the same as a Honda Accord, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's already kind of there. But I guess the reason I'm thinking about this, I just saw yesterday, and I don't know if you saw this or not, but Fully Charged, we're going to be at Fully Charged Live coming up, but they did this thing called Maddie Goes Electric. Did you watch this?
Yeah, I just started watching. I didn't get through the first episode, but I started to check it out.
So it's a cool series, and definitely go check it out if you're curious. But it looks like it's kind of a series on the Fully Charged channel where they're following Maddie, and I don't know her last name, apologies, but she's basically looking into going electric. She's one of their Fully Charged staff people, I guess. But anyway, this first episode was her deciding which car to buy, and it was funny because she was going online, she was looking at all these different models and stuff, and she was surprised many different models that were out there, and that's all well and good. But it was funny because she literally didn't even consider the Model 3 at first until she finally, kind of ran across it and pulled it up, and she was just shocked at how, wow, that's not really that expensive. And I'm just kind of like, at what point are people going to stop seeing it that way? At what price point does it need to be before they're like, oh, this is something that I could actually buy? It wouldn't be that hurdle to get over.
I believe the average sale price of a new car in the US is around 25,000, maybe a little bit less.
Okay.
So that would probably be right there. And then, there's the local incentives, and again, who knows, 4 or 5 years from now when this thing comes out, there might be new federal incentives. In fact, there's been proposals for the government here in the US to bring that back. So I think that the hard part is it comes down to our perception of how we pay for things. So if you think about your phone, people have a price in mind that they paid for their phone. Let's say, it's $400 to, I don't know, $1,500 or something like that. But you're also paying for, probably an insurance plan, probably a case, probably a screen protector, hopefully those things, and also the service to it. So, and you could argue, oh, you don't have to pay for the service to it. Like, okay, but then you just have like a really expensive camera or like little dumb thing, right?
Yeah.
So point being, I don't think our minds in this country anyways really understand the concept of a true cost of ownership or total cost of ownership. So I think it's going to be like all we think about is that like monthly payment, right? And so even if you just look at people say, oh, well, my Honda costs $20,000, sure, and that's $500 a month, let's say, but how much do you pay in gas? And then how often do you have to get oil changes? Like we don't associate those things with the price of the vehicle. Those are like in addition to. So I don't know, like until we hit like pure actual parity, 25 grand is really close. That might be good enough. I don't think that perception will go away just because I don't think our brains, like the whole country, the whole culture would have to change how we think about the cost of things, which is like really, really hard to have that shift.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, like the maintenance and the gas cost and everything is just sort of like baked in. It's just like this background noise that we don't think about. And it's not something that you pay once a month. It's something you pay when you go and you buy gas. It's like buying milk,
Mm-hmm.
You don't factor in the cost of milk to your household budget. Most of
Right.
us don't, I assume. But yeah.
Well, and on top of that, you probably assume it's just kind of the same. Right? If I had a Honda Civic and then I bought a Toyota Corolla, the cost of the gas and the upkeep is going to be, very close from one to the other. So when you think of the price, what you're thinking of is the car itself, not all those other things, because unless you buy, a big Tahoe or something, a big SUV, you're probably not thinking like, oh, and then we lie to ourselves about those things too. This is the beauty of our brain and how we really try to trick ourselves with our confirmation bias to think that, oh yeah, I went from a Prius to a Hummer, and oh man, it's a little bit more in gas and maintenance. I mean, but really, but it's fine, right? Like because we want to believe that we made a good decision. Because if we didn't make a good decision, then we feel stupid. And nobody wants to feel that way, right? So it's just kind of a funny thing how our brains work. So yeah, I don't know if people's perception will ever change around this.
Yeah, the justification machine in our heads.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
You can do the whole like, but if I have a Hummer, I can get everything in one trip.
Right.
So it would probably actually save money.
Yeah.
Over taking multiple trips.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if I shoot my videos of me standing here talking in 8K raw, they're going to be, I can get the consistent like look and feel every time. You're like,
right.
So it's probably worth, a $50,000 camera versus a $5,000 camera.
That nobody can actually watch in 8K.
Right. Yeah. But you're like, but it's fine because, it's future proof. That's like my favorite thing people say about video. They're like, oh, I want to shoot, and I think Tim does this, like he's not here so we can tease him about it. But like, I want to shoot in 6K. I want to shoot in 6K so I can export in 5K, and it's future proof. Like anyone's going to give a crap about this thing you're talking about today, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, or whenever, 4K, 5K is common, Maybe
now,
something, but it's just like rare. Okay.
When I shot my movie way back in the day, and this totally dates me, the high def 1080 was just a new thing.
Yeah.
And it was prohibitively expensive for me to shoot it on high def. So I shot it standard def because that's what I had in front of me. And logically that makes sense. And I even say now it's like the best camera you have is the one that, or the best camera to use is the one you have, if you're doing something. But I will, and it's funny because the problem is now you can pull up my movie on your screen and it's like that big,
Yeah.
It's so tiny, and I regret it in a way, but then I also have to remind myself, like, it just wasn't an option. Like, I mean, there were high def cameras back then, but it was like, I couldn't afford it. Nobody
Yeah.
I knew had one.
Yeah.
And of course, it just blows my mind that I can do more on this thing than I had available to me,
Well, who's the director, filmmaker that does that, where he shoots movies on iPhones intentionally?
There's a few of them now. There was a movie called Tangerine a few years
Hmm.
ago that was shot on a phone,
Yeah.
and it was
I,
like a festival darling and did really
I
well.
I remember seeing some funny photos on Twitter of that, where it's like it has a guy, and he's for people that don't know camera stuff, this may be a little bit of a rabbit hole, but he has like a cage with his phone in there, and then he has a couple different lenses, and then he has like an actual legit cinema lens on top of it with an ND filter
Yeah,
and a stabilizer. Like the camera, the phone itself was like, $1,000. All the other crap around it was like $7,000 to $10,000
sure.
worth of stuff, and it's just the captions like "shot on iPhone." You're like, yeah,
Eh,
sure,
eh.
right. Like getting the
With
most
thirty
out of
thousand
that.
dollars of glass on it.
Exactly. So it's kind of funny, but you're right. I mean, it's so hard. I don't know. We can tease Tim because he's not here. So yeah,
That was a rabbit hole. That was fun.
yeah.
Where are
Speaking
we?
of
What day
speaking
is
of
it?
Tim, why don't we toss it over to him now?
Yeah,
Get
Tim,
some
what you got?
space news. Yeah.
Let's talk space.
Hey guys, I'm sure as you know, I am on my way down to Kennedy Space Center to capture SpaceX. Their in-flight abort test, which is going to be awesome. And I am road tripping. I'm going to be down there with my family for some vacation. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to share it's going to be a hybrid. A little bit of road tripping. You can kind of come along with me and experience what it's like to supercharge a little bit here and there, and all the fun adventures, just a little. And then we're also, while I'm supercharging, at one point we're actually going to sit and I'm going to go through the news with you guys. So there's a few fun items that I wanted to talk about this week in space. So we're going to kind of pop back and forth between a few different things here. So all right, here we go. So I wanted to show you guys some real world first-hand experience, I think, with this is gonna be our first time actually using proper V3 chargers at a really low state of charge. So I'm only at 7% right now, so I'm really excited to see how this actually ends up charging. So let's see what we can actually get here in real world conditions, working my way on the 1,400 mile trip down to Florida. Let's see what kind of charge rates we can actually get, because this could be absolutely game-changing. Vehicle battery very low, of course. Let's see how these things are doing. Now, there was a little warning on the nav that said these are not performing optimally, but believe it or not, some people from Nashville told me that it's looking good. So there we go, plugged in the supercharger. You can tell this is a V3 because it has the thinner cable. And so it's actually a liquid cooled cable, which is pretty slick. But let's pop in here and see how it's doing. Let's see if it's okay. Here we go. Starting at 120. That's what a V2 will do. V2 can get up to about 150 at peak times. And I'm looking at the number being the kilowatt hour there. So we'll see if this actually kicks into like full-blown full-blown supercharging speeds, this might be limited to V2 speeds right now, which is maybe why it'd show up on the nav as being like, what did it say actually? When I looked at this, it says, if you click on this right now, the nav says, it did say earlier that, yeah, I don't remember what it said, but let's just take a look here and see if, there we go, 150, 155. Oh yeah. Oh, look at that. Now we're talking 180, 190. I don't think I've actually really seen charging rates this fast before. Okay, this is insane. Oh man, look at that. We've already gained 3 kilowatt hours of battery charge so far. So, wow, if these are deployed on road trips everywhere, I mean, game over. Because look, I've already gained, yeah, I mean, I'm just sitting here charging at almost 1,000 miles an hour. That's 1,600 kilometers in an hour. And so 20 minutes will get you, you know, a third of that. So, yeah, that's why, although, you know, remember it tapers off. So as we get closer to around 50%, you'll see your charge rate start to decline. And the closer you get to 100% after that, it just really, really gets down to a slow trickle, just like your cell phones do. That's just a byproduct of lithium ion. But, you know, here we are looking at getting, you know, sustaining pretty close to 900 miles per hour, which again, you know, for 20 minutes, we should get pretty, you know, a pretty high rate of charge. I don't actually need too much tonight. As you can see by the clock here, it's 1:20 in the morning. And I'm only about 20 more miles from my hotel. So, sorry, 32 kilometers or whatever from my hotel. So I just have a little bit further to go. So I'm just gonna make sure I've got enough to get there, and then I will be charging there tonight. So I'll wake up to a totally full car this morning, which is awesome. That helps tomorrow's final leg of the trip speed up quite a bit. How much further do we have? Navigate to Kennedy Space Center. I mean, that's close enough. I'm not actually going straight there, but it still gives you a good sense of how far it is. So 630 miles is what it said. So if I were just to keep going tonight, I would have 14 more hours of charge time, or 14 more hours of drive time, I mean, sorry. Nope, 11 hours. That's not bad. And don't forget, like I said, I'll wake up to a full charge. So that'd be great if I only had about 11 hours of driving. That'd be amazing, actually. So there you go. That is the update. Already at 20%. That's insane. That's just so weird. I mean, I know it's still not, you know, gasoline charging fast, you know, as fast as throwing in some gasoline, some petrol or diesel or whatever. And I know it's not quite the same speeds, but as far as going on a road trip, if you were, you know, plugging in, you go into the convenience store near you, you go, you pee, you do whatever you need. By the time you come out, you're probably already good enough to continue on with your trip. You know, if you take a 5 or 10 minute break. And if these are starting to get closer and closer grouped together, especially V3s like this, you know, you don't want to be filling up to the top. You want to be going and pulling in. Like I pulled in at, what was that, 7%, 6 or 7%? That's ideal. If you can get around there every time you pull in, that's like a dream come true. So, yeah. So that's pretty fun. So I'll update you guys again here. And maybe I'll just keep doing a little bit of this. And yeah, and I'll try to bring you some, I'll bring you some space news tomorrow too while I charge. This is gonna be what you get from me for our Ludicrous Future this week, I guess. Okay, got a couple hours of sleep here, and oh, I guess they didn't realize that Dodge came out with electrical vehicles. I didn't realize that, but here's what it's like. So in general, you know, when you're traveling like this cross country, you know, I end up always booking a hotel that has a charger. So I wake up to the car being, you know, charged, which is amazing. And yeah, so that it's one of those things. It helps offset the inconvenience to wake up to a car that's fully charged, so you can get your first 300 miles without stopping if you want in the morning. I'm one of those people, I like to stop every 2 hours, at least every 2 hours, because otherwise I just get bored and like my back hurts and stuff if I'm sitting too long. So I like to get up about every 2 hours and charge for, you know, 15-20 minutes. Never mind the mess, never mind all the Mambos that I'm eating up there. Not a big deal. Okay, so I have to admit, it's been probably a decade since I've eaten these, and I didn't remember that they're called Mambas and not Mambos. So leave it out of the comment section. I don't want to hear it. Okay, so I just had some lunch in Atlanta while supercharging, and it supercharged like too fast for me to even finish eating lunch. And so I'm going to be showing you guys some space news here quick on the screen of the Tesla. So I've got the web browser pulled up here, and let's just go ahead and clear that out. And if you're listening, I'm sorry, this is going to be a very visual experience, but I'm going to go to space flight now, and I'm going to show you guys a little article, because We have a lot of updates here. Starliner had a big week, actually, if you guys remember. Of course, Starliner is Boeing's spacecraft that flew just a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago or so. Had the anomaly, as we all know, the timer anomaly. But here's the cool thing, is they released some in-cabin video. So this was really cool. I'm really glad they did this because I'm glad at this because they provided literally no decent video or anything beforehand. You know, or during the actual flight, they didn't do any real like streaming. As a matter of fact, we didn't even get any like footage after stage separation of the vehicle at all. It was really disappointing, but lucky for us guys, they actually gave us some really good views of launch, including, I've always wanted to see this. Look at that, there's actually liftoff. You can see the towers clearing. It's a really cool video. Definitely check this out. They posted it to YouTube. Very high quality. You see Rosie, their onboard test flight dummy, hanging out. I just thought this was really cool. And I'm really glad that they even showed some thruster firings during the actual anomaly, which good for them. They even like brought it up. I don't know. I was happy by this amount of transparency. This is what I think we kind of need to see thruster firings after timing anomaly. They show what it would have looked like in the cabin. And it kind of, it helped clear a little bit of you know, people's fears, saying like, oh, you know, thruster anomaly, it sounds like a scary thing, but really it was just some thrusters kind of going toot toot every now and then. And again, if there were an astronaut in the seat, they would have easily been able to correct it. So good for Boeing for providing some transparency and showing, you know, what looked like on orbit. You know, it only spent 2 days in space instead of a full week, but still they got a lot of data back. And then most importantly, as we know, they did re-entry and touchdown, and the views of it on touchdown is actually awesome. Well, re-entry is amazing. Of course, you can see the plasma glowing outside of the windows. Really cool footage to check out. So again, if you're listening to this, first I apologize about the quality. It probably sounds a little tinny compared to normal. But second, you definitely have to get on YouTube and check out the video they released. They did a really good job of showing us more video and more footage of the things that we want to see. So thank you, Boeing, for releasing this footage. I thought this was awesome. Definitely a step in the right direction. But here's touchdown. Check out touchdown. It really looks pretty gentle for being a land landing. When you watch Soyuz touchdown, it really does look more like a car crash compared to this. So good job, Boeing. But that's actually not all for Boeing news, because this week they held a press conference and actually invited the press out to see Starliner after it came back. So remember, it touched down some weeks ago, and you know, they've now got it all the way back to Kennedy Space Center after landing in New Mexico. And they're doing some checks, and the news is starting to come out that it's actually performed better than expected, or at least, I guess, kind of on the upper levels of expectations as far as refurbishment, because they are planning to totally refly this vehicle. And in doing so, you know, obviously you have to do some refurbishment and checkouts and all these things afterwards. So basically, the moral of the story is it came back and is looking really good. And because of that, Boeing feels like they're going to be on schedule to be able to reuse the spacecraft on the second crewed launch. And that's great news. We want to see more of that. We want, you know, in my opinion, I always want things to be moving forward and progressing. And obviously refurbishment plans and refurbishment being as good or like on the upper levels of what you're expecting is definitely good news. I guess this is just going to be a Boeing episode for me, because obviously, you know, I'm going to be talking way too much about SpaceX here next week when I get done with the in-flight abort test stuff. So there's going to be already too much of that from me. And there's actually a decent amount of Boeing news, because we actually have some good promising progress for SLS arriving at Stennis Space Center to do what they're calling the Green Run campaign. And my friends at NASAspaceflight.com have a really good article on this that you guys should definitely check out. But basically, they're going to be doing, this is like the same thing as when SpaceX does a static fire. They're doing that with SLS. And last year they were considering skipping the whole Green Run process and not even bothering to actually do a Green Run. or a static fire, and they opted to do it because they thought it'd be a good validation of all the systems. And so they took it by barge and got it to Stennis this week, and are starting to begin. They had a Pathfinder vehicle that was there to test how to crane and how to maneuver it and how to get it installed. That was basically just a giant mock-up. And now this is the actual core, and this is the core that's going to fly. So hopefully everything goes really well, because this is going to be used for the first uncrewed Artemis mission. This is core stage 1, and it's going to be firing for that full 8-minute duration. So it's really going to be taking a beating, really doing, being put through its paces. This is good news. Unfortunately, this is where you can see the difference between SpaceX and Boeing, because this process will likely take until July or August to fire SLS. So think about that, because SpaceX, it feels more like when it's a mission like this with NASA, there's all these procedures, and before they even write up the procedures, they'll literally make a test version of it, and then write up more procedures and test everything. It gets to the point where, something like this, just to fuel up a rocket, will take almost 6 months likely, and it won't be leaving the testing. And so we'll hopefully see it fire before then, but then to actually leave the testing and get put back in the barge and heading out to Kennedy Space Center, they're saying at best basically late summer. It's a different timeline, but then again, SpaceX would likely say we're going to do it in a month, and it might take to the end of summer. And the difference is SpaceX will literally just learn on the fly, and they'd just be like, here, we're just gonna, I don't know, just grab a crane, I don't know, hey, you over there, come over here, we're gonna move this. And they just kind of do things, and it's different philosophies. At the end of the day, I'm just really, really happy to actually see some hardware for a rocket that's literally destined for the moon. That's really cool in my opinion. And seeing, again, you guys know me, I'm a huge Starship fan, but seeing an actual rocket getting ready to do some full-scale testing is always a good. I mean, this is equivalent to if they did a booster, a Starship booster test, basically. Think of it as that. So that's how far along SLS is in development. I know it's taken a long time in develop to get to this point, but to compare it to Starship, it'd be like if SpaceX were testing the full core booster, a full super heavy booster, and not just the upper stage Starship. So that's kind of like what this is. And so seeing progress on this is a very, very good thing in my opinion. I'm ready to see that thing fly. I want to see that thing fly. Well, guys, that's going to do it for me. I'm going to keep heading down to Kennedy Space Center. Got to get there tonight. We have to pick up press badges tomorrow. There's a press conference tomorrow, and set up pad cameras and all that stuff, and also do some kind of testing of my live stream setup. So I got to keep going, keep heading on the road. Thank you guys for tuning in, but I'll pass it back off to the other guys. And I should definitely point out that this is not normal. This is not how you'd normally charge on a road trip. Don't do this. I just had to get this news out so I could get it on time so our editor, Ben, could handle this episode. This is not what I would normally do. Normally you fill this vehicle, when you're charging on the road trips, 50 to 60% to get you to the next, skip a supercharger and get down to that one almost empty. So this is going to be unusual. Don't judge me. Don't leave comments about how this is bad charging habits and inefficient and dumb. I know. I'm just trying to get this out to you guys so it can be out in a timely manner. So that's why. There you have it.
So hey Ben, you know how lithium ion batteries are always blowing up and stuff?
Yeah.
You know how you really want to take a lithium ion battery and shoot it with a gun and have it still work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, some guys are working on that. They might have a lithium ion battery that is indestructible.
The guns or the battery?
Well, there's people working on guns. Yeah, no, so this was at, where was this? This was at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. They have a nearly invincible lithium ion battery. So this Wired article says. But yeah, so I'll be honest, when I first saw this, I was kind of like, that's not what we need to be working on. We need to be working on energy density.
Right.
But reading the article did kind of change my mind a little bit. So basically, they have this battery chemistry it's transparent. So that's the battery right there. It's transparent, and it was actually talking about it could be it's as thin and clear as a contact lens. So imagine a contact lens that could actually, I don't know, project stuff or whatever because it's got energy in it, saved up in it. But no, you can burn it. So it says right here, the secret to making an indestructible battery comes down to the electrolyte, which, it's always about the electrolyte. So they use a different combination of lithium salts for this. And you can literally burn it. You can hit it with a thing. Actually, here is a little. Can you hear that?
Mm-mm.
No? Oh, okay.
You have to
I
narrate
can hear
for
it.
us.
So it's not so much like something that would power cars, but it's like, look, that's the battery right there.
Weird. It's like a little clear gel plastic.
Yeah.
Almost.
It's like on these like lithium polymers that it's
like
created
a sticker. Yeah.
Look at that. Boom.
So they're hitting it with what do they hit it with?
Well, she says ballistic impact there.
Oh, so
I guess it's supposed to be kind of
simulator.
like a bullet shot or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
See, so like that's the one at the top left is the one that we've got right now. It burns.
So they're burning. Yeah.
I'm not good at sharing things and talking at the same time.
So this is interesting. So what would the application for, so it's almost like, they keep showing these little watch batteries. So you guys, if you're just listening in, you can imagine a clear watch battery that's even thinner, but, can be kind of melded into a sticker. You can just like cut it and shape it however you want.
So you like kind of make it in these sheets and they cut it out and it holds energy and everything. One of the things it was saying in the article was that it could actually be woven into fibers of clothes. So your clothes could hold energy and you could like have a charge port coming out of your pocket and charge your phone with it or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now obviously the indestructibility of it in terms of like having keeping phones from exploding and stuff like that, there's that. But right here it says that because it's flexible, it can be incorporated into wearable electronics and even directly into clothing as fiber. There's also a lot of scientific applications, autonomous underwater vehicles, drones, satellites, that kind of thing. It has about the same energy density as lithium ion, or it's comparable to it, but it does not cycle as much. Like right now, it only cycles about 100 times.
And it's dead.
They're working on that. So yeah.
One thing that would be interesting is if you could turn that into like paint protection film for your car and just basically cover your entire car in it.
Yeah. Or
if you could make a transparent metal windshield and out of it. So imagine if all the glass in your car is also a battery.
Right.
Maybe that's dangerous though. If you touch it, you like touch one window to the other, you could like shock yourself or something. might not be the
like
best
you're leaning on one side and you hold somebody's hand and
yeah, right. I could see. But interesting.
Well, I thought, it's not necessarily like a car thing, but it might have different applications in wearable technology or even like body, like I'm trying to say, like in your body stuff. I can't word today.
Like
I'm recording a podcast.
Yeah, almost like a pacemaker or something like that.
Right. Yeah. As we get into like nanotech and whatnot, it can power.
That stuff scares the hell out of me. As pro tech as I am. By the way, another quick rabbit hole because we got time today. Today's like a rabbit hole day. Tim's not here. There's not a lot of huge news out there. We just got something called the SNU. Have you heard of this? Probably not.
I've heard of it, but I don't.
Okay, so if you guys are listening and you have kids, you probably have heard of this. Probably some Facebook ads been sent your way. Might be one right now. Let's just put an ad break here. Chances are it's this. No, anyways. This is a bassinet. You know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's called the SNU Smart Sleeper. I guess this kind of fits. It's a little bit, down a rabbit hole, but it is a they call it the Smart Sleeper. It's basically like a bassinet that you put your kid in, and it learns how to rock them to sleep on its own. Like you kind of strap them into it, and we're showing photos of it here. Yeah, you kind of strap them into it, And like you would, if you're familiar with babies, you used to have a little sleep sack, kind of like a sleeping bag. You put them in. This one is actually attached to the thing, and then you turn it on, and it starts to figure out their patterns. So it actually will, if they're crying, it will change its rhythm. It'll change the sound. It'll change the thing until it like hits the right the right frequency or whatever, and then they go to sleep. And then they'll stay asleep for however long.
So, machine learning.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a machine learning kind of a thing. And so we just got this, and it's like witnessing a miracle. 48 seconds it took. I put my 3-month-old in there, and he was whining and screaming and crying, and 48 seconds it figured out the formula, just literally like full blown to dead silent asleep. Magic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do they have these for adults?
Dude, seriously. Yeah,
as bad as I sleep, I could use something like that.
So yeah, I don't know how we got on that topic, but that thing is amazing. And it kind of blows my mind just how advanced some of these things are getting, right? This is that ludicrous future. Like the future of like my grandkids, assuming we have them, like they may not, like my kids may never have to know the pain that I went through trying to get them to sleep at night at 3 a.m.
Yeah. Well, it just kind of shows how far reaching the AI thing is.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking that your grandkids will not know a time when computers are just tools. They're partners. Like right now it's like we do all the cognitive processing, and then we use the computer as a tool to get that cognitive thing out in some way.
Yep.
Whereas I think in the coming years, we're more and more going to see like the computer and the person working together cognitively to create things.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think it gets, I mean, if we're going down like that far ahead, think about like my grandkids for sure will not know have to drive ever. The car will they'll hit a button, and it'll either to own one. This is a big question, whether or not car ownership will continue to exist, but they'll do something, and it's either their car or another car will just drive up to them, hop in, and takes them where they want to go, and they get out. Never have to own a car, never even have to know how to drive. No steering wheel, none of that nonsense. My kids will definitely, learn to drive, but they may not really need to in 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how fast things are going. But also along those veins, and with Neuralink and those kind of things, I could see what this little keypad here and this little thing I move around on my desk, this keyboard and mouse, as kind of novelties that used to exist.
Yeah.
But clearly it's a low bandwidth interface, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I could see an AI that and that's actually like helps you think, to where you're like, what about this? And then it can say, yeah, well, someone did that. Maybe what about this? And you can kind of like bounce it just like another person would.
I mean, there's people that have brought up the question, like someday I know this sounds very dystopian, but will someday there be like an AI that controls the world? Because I mean, we aren't doing a good job of it ourselves. we're just not.
Yeah.
So at some point, we might just kind of be like, okay, how about we just hand over the functioning of the planet to this AI system that can kind of like make sure everything is, working the way it's supposed to. And I mean, there are people already kind of talking about that.
What if we all go live on a spaceship and we just have those little bots here collecting our trash and stuff? And then
may come to that.
I just watched WALL-E again. So if you guys are unfamiliar with that movie, you need to go watch that. It's a great little
Just
movie.
because you saw that Segway thing?
Yes. How nuts. Okay, so if you guys, I mean, quick, it's called the Segway Pod. What's it called?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Pod. Ugh.
Can I say real quick, though, I am very upset at the company Segway for making everybody think that that's how you spell the word segue.
Yes, you can say that.
The grammar Nazi that I am.
Yeah, because there's like a U and an E in there, right? In the
I mean, and this makes more sense in terms of spelling, but yeah, it's actually like SCGUE. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I love the little notifications on websites now that say like, I don't know if you can see this one here, but it says continue to cite. Those are my options. So it's about cookies and GDPR, which we've never really talked about, but is a big thing, and you guys have probably heard of it. But data is an important thing. Finally, people are recognizing that. And so on this website, thewired.com, you have two options: continue to cite or do not sell my personal information.
So what happens if you click on that? Can you go to the site?
It gives you this whole big thing, and so it looks. I assume it's Condé Nast. Maybe they own Wired, apparently. So I can say. So there's literally this is just so funny. There's literally a button here that says "Sell my personal information." It's like a toggle, on or off. Who's gonna be like, yeah, I'm good. Go ahead. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Is this a California thing?
No, this is a European thing.
Oh.
Yeah. So GDPR, are you familiar with that general data protection regulation?
Ish, a little.
Yeah.
Sorta.
So quick. Sorry, just to context for people. Facebook, Cambridge Analytica stuff. All familiar with that? What happened there? Idea being that user information was harvested by Cambridge Analytica via Facebook ads, and so from that. They put in laws and regulations that said you have to very clearly and very plainly state when someone visits your website, what are you doing? So if you use a cookie, you're putting a cookie on their computer. Is that cookie going to only track what they do on your site? Or is that cookie also going to track everywhere else they go on the internet? Also, do you partner with third parties, which this is called behavioral tracking? It's a trillion-dollar industry that is totally like shadowy behind the scenes in the internet. Are you partnering with them? So this is how you can go on Amazon and search for a new smart sleeper and then go to Facebook and see an ad for it. Well, those two use similar third-party engines to track and do all the data stuff, and they sell it back and forth. And so all that. So they're able to track you that way. But that's what that whole thing is. So that's why you see all these things. That's why you got 1,000 emails that are like, we updated our privacy policy. Those kind of things.
So am I like, would I see that over here, or is that a location-based thing?
Yeah.
I guess I just don't pay attention to those warnings.
And that was one of the things it was supposed to solve. But guess what?
I'm the problem.
No, it's a very tough, impossible thing. No, that's basically. So what happened is this was a European regulation. It doesn't actually. So if you're like a U.S. company and you could somehow limit your web traffic to U.S. only, you would not need this because we don't have that same law here in the United States. But because basically, the internet is global, everyone that's on the internet has it now. And so that's what those things are. Ironically, or kind of like, I actually went the other way with my website, with Teslanomics.co. I just said, fine, I'm not going to do cookies. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. So I actually ripped out Google Analytics. I ripped out every tracking thing. The only tracking stuff I have is completely anonymized. So I don't know anything about the people visiting my site other than like what pages they're visiting, how long they're on them, if they're watching videos, whatever. But there's no cookies as soon as you exit the site. That's it. You're gone. I know nothing about you. So I actually went the other way and said, instead of trying to like come up with these wonky privacy things and try to adhere to this standard, forget it. I'm just going to, because I don't care about that information. I'm not an advertiser. I want you to go watch my videos on YouTube, and that's about it. Right. So it's like, oh, that's the whole deal. So I don't know how many people are doing that, but it's kind of a, you can kind of just opt out as somebody that owns a website, or you can, spend tons of money trying to retrofit everything and all that. So.
Gotcha.
Segway. Wally chair.
Segway to Segway.
Yeah, this was unveiled at CES. S-Pod, I think it's called. Oh man, it's like a two-wheel Segway, but it's a chair that you ride in that goes 24 miles per hour, which is absolutely bonkers.
Usain Bolt fast.
Yeah. So there's your dystopian future reference of, yeah, why do we even need to walk?
Now,
And then
it
furthermore,
does have a wheel up front.
that's for getting on and off of it.
Oh, okay.
So to get in and out of it, it actually dips forward.
You mean you have to step into it?
Yeah, it doesn't just like lay out like a seat and flatten,
It
and
doesn't
then
just scoop you up.
yeah, pretty wild. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy to see those things. CES is such a wild show.
I'm gonna have to go someday. Just never had a need to.
It's a funny thing. So many people I've met in the past week are like, "Oh, how was CES? Oh, it looked like it was so fun." I don't know anyone that works in tech or media that would describe CES as fun. I really don't. Like maybe from the outside, it looks that way, and that's the point. But the running around and just pure madness of like trying to get to meetings left and right and try to film one thing and meet up with the friends that you only see once a year.
Yeah.
It's an absolute marathon. It's I don't know. I wouldn't describe it as fun. It's like a mountain of work is how I would describe it.
I guess VidCon is the only comparison I have to something like that, because it can be
just a zoo, right?
A lot. I mean, like at the end of the day, I'm just kind of sitting there like, I have to decompress now. I've been around 1,000 teenagers, and
you know what I did on day 2 of CES is I actually put my earbuds in and I put white noise on the whole day. Or not the whole day, but the whole time on the show floor. So all these bells and, lights and things trying to just sensory overload. Just
it's like a carnival midway.
Yes. But like the most insane one packed with 180,000 people.
With stuff flying around.
Yeah. It's wild. I feel like there's probably some like areas that are less crowded. And regardless of what's there, it's probably more fun to go check that out. Because when you go to the ones that are crowded, it's just like, get me out of here. I just can't personally with crowds and stuff. That's why I didn't get footage like the Rivian thing or any of those. I'm like, I walk by, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just introverted enough to where it's like if I go to something like that, I really need a minute to kind of like go off into a corner and be quiet for a second, And it's like when I mentioned Carnival Midway, so the State Fair of Texas we do here every year, and it's like a big deal, and they've got the big Carnival Midway, and I kind of avoid it like the plague. I mean, the rest of the fair is fine, but the midway where you're walking down, there's all these people barking at you, and they're like, come play the ring toss game, Yeah. And I'm just like, stop yelling at me. I'm so traumatized right now.
Yeah, I wonder if CES wasn't in Las Vegas, if it would be different. Because that's just Las Vegas in general, right?
Yeah.
Just on a normal day, that's what you just described. That's what it is. Then throw this in, and it's like 1,000 times more crazy and more people yelling and screaming at you type of stuff. Yeah. My God. Now, yeah. Speaking of
segue to
going down and needing some quiet time. BMW and Mercedes sales are going down. How's that?
Terrible. Keep going.
Yeah. So some new data coming to us here from Teslarati. Title I like: Tesla Model 3 wreaks havoc on MB, or Mercedes-Benz, as the commoner may know them as, and BMW in the luxury sedan segment. So looking at some sales figures here, you can just see a huge kind of downswing in the entire luxury segment.
One of these things is not like the others.
Yeah, and then you see the absolute hockey stick growth, as we would say, from the Tesla Model 3. So, yeah, I mean...
Cybertruck shaped, actually, when you turn to the side.
That's right. So where's the rotate button? No, I need one of those rotating monitors for that. Stupidest thing.
I saw that.
Stupid. Please, people, stop shooting in vertical.
Yeah.
Stop doing that for anything. Anyways, so Model 3 crushing. Now, there is an interesting question here that I think I wonder your opinion on, and that is whether or not Tesla Model 3 should be considered a luxury vehicle.
I mean, it is technically
right
now, right?
That's how
Yeah.
people classify it. That's the industry. Yep.
See, you know what? I've had this thought because it's not the most luxurious car
Right.
on the inside. It's pretty Spartan. But the electronics system is clearly above and beyond like anything. The drivetrain is awesome, but that doesn't usually factor into a luxury brand so much.
Right.
Keeping in mind, I'm not like an expert on cars necessarily, or even the categorization of them or anything, but I don't know. Like, I don't feel like I'm driving a luxury car,
Right.
but I know that's how everybody sees it.
Well, it's luxury in
So
price.
there's kind of a weird. Yeah.
In purchase price.
I don't know. What do you think?
I think it depends what you define as luxury. And an article I saw a while ago kind of highlighted that advanced tech and things like that is the new luxury.
Mm.
So the gaudy, ornate versions of luxury cars that are traditional is not what the newer generation of luxury buyers want. Certainly, a Mercedes interior is much more plush and yes, much more comfortable. In those regards, in terms of like traditional car stuff, I would say, yeah, it doesn't really meet the standard of what a luxury vehicle would be. But I think the argument is that the paradigm of what is luxury is shifting towards modern convenience. And so when you look at autopilot and voice commands and a giant screen and watching, Netflix while you're, waiting outside a grocery store for your wife to grab whatever, it's things like that, then these, those be like luxury is shifting away from, gold iPhones into, just more advanced tech.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in that regard, it is the most luxurious, if that's how you were to define it. But I think there's some kind of old stalwarts there that just don't want to let go of that ostrich skin leather seat or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Is ostrich skin also leather, or is leather mean cow? It's a question for the ages.
I don't know.
But so I think it's different. Like if you get into, and I don't know if you've got been in a Ferrari ever or things like that. Well, I guess yeah. See, that's another thing. People think of like high-end cars as like a Lamborghini and a Ferrari. These are not luxury cars. They're not comfortable. They suck, but they're fast as hell and they're super fun to drive. But like a Bentley was where I would probably put your typical, heated seat, massaging kind of chair that reclines, and you have a driver like a Maybach kind of a thing. That stuff still exists and it always will, but where do you draw the line, I guess is the question.
So where is what do you call the category above that? Like say a Rolls Royce, where like nobody buys a Rolls Royce to drive it. You have somebody drive you.
Yeah.
That's the thing where you're sitting in the backseat making calls to other heads of state and stuff.
An ultra luxury kind of a deal,
I guess.
Yeah, because there's something known as accessible luxury. So if you look at the auto segment, you would see things like Infiniti and Acura and Lexus. And these are the luxury brands of Nissan, Honda, and Toyota. And so, yeah, they're luxury in the sense that they're just like a step up from those very, economy type brands. Mm-hmm. But they don't nearly touch what you would even like a Mercedes or a BMW, and are in a completely different, orbit than a Bentley or a Rolls Royce or something. So there's like different tiers of luxury, and I think that luxury itself is changing, is the idea behind this. And so so if you compare it there, it's crushing, absolutely. But it's also kind of a mass market car, so of course it's going to crush, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I do think it's kind of unfair to compare it to other luxury brands because I don't really think of it in that sense necessarily. But then I've had it for a year and I'm used to it, and maybe I'm spoiled now. I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah, it's cherry picking the data, right? You can look at it and go, oh, look at the 0 to 60 time of my Model 3 Performance versus a Rolls-Royce Phantom something. And you're like, yeah, but the point isn't to go 0 to 60 in that car.
Yeah.
You know, as good old John Travolta told us in what was that movie, Get Shorty? He's like, if you're important, people will wait. It was like him and Danny DeVito talking about an electric car. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, I was having a conversation the other day with a buddy of mine. We were out having coffee, and we were talking about I don't remember how it came up, but you know, the rash of Teslas getting messed with and keyed and kicked and stuff like that, and it's all getting caught on Century Cam. And we've talked about it here that, you know, I don't know necessarily that Teslas are being targeted more than other cars, or if they're just being caught because it's the only car that has a security system that can do that. And he was kind of making the point, it was like, well, it's kind of like back in the day when like Mercedes would have that little emblem on the hood and people would break that off just to kind of give a middle finger to that rich guy, you know. And he was making the point that he still thought that Teslas had that sort of flavor to them.
Yeah,
you know, that like if you're looking around a parking lot and you see a Tesla, it's going to stand out, and somebody's being like, Richie Rich over there, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you just want to, nah.
Yeah, no, I'm with it. Yeah, you see Tom Brady get knocked out of the first round of the playoffs, you're like, yeah, take that. You know, like I'm sure he's a nice guy. You know, I'm sure he's probably a great person to hang out with.
Yeah.
But you just want him to fail, right? You want him to lose.
Take him down a peg.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's a lot of the dissent and the people that are shorting Tesla stock, which are, you know, collecting welfare now mostly. So it's one of those things where, you want them to fail because they are, you know, they have that stature, that thing. I mean, it's like Apple. You know, Apple's a lot of the same way. Like people hate Apple for not good reasons, just because they are, you know, they're Apple, and I'm one of those people. But
that's what I'm saying. Like I've had this car for about 1.5 years now, and I'm used to it, and I never really thought it was like luxurious or anything, you know. And I certainly don't now because I'm used to it. So it's just kind of baffling to me that people would see it in that light in the first place, but then see it and have that rage build in them to the point that it's like, I have to slash my along the side of this car just to put this guy in his place or whatever. And it's kind of like, it's just my car, dude. It's
just a car.
And I never bought it for any luxury purpose. I bought it because it drives like an amazing car.
Now I'm showing here on the photo of our first Tesla and stuff, but I was going to say that this actually doesn't help when your delivery experience is like this and they give it to you with a giant bow on it like that.
Now, did you drive it with a bow on it? Because then you're asking for it.
Ooh. Now they don't give you the bow. See, that's the thing they don't tell you.
Dude.
Yeah. I know.
What's the point?
Fraud.
Just keep
fake,
the car.
Sad. Yeah, no. This was our delivery day, January 16th, 2016.
See, even the baby's happy.
That was the irony of the whole thing, is that this photo is like the happiest my son has ever looked in a photo. Oh man. Yeah, that was a good time. But back then, and it very much was like that, I would say.
Sure.
You know?
And I think that's kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier, like at what price point will people stop to see it that way? Because I mean, the Model S definitely was for several years, like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, it earned that stigma essentially.
Yeah. Well, of course, it was like $100,000 car. Right.
And in fact, when I bought ours, that was the thing, is I didn't even consider a Tesla when I was looking at electric cars, because I had that in my brain of like, no way. But then I remember at our company, we had bought one or leased one for our like loaner car for people visiting, which is how I started to actually get, used to one. And from there, I was like, well, wait, if we can lease one just for when people come visit, like maybe it's not as crazy expensive as I thought. Mm-hmm. So it opened up my eyes. I think that's where a lot of these other companies coming out with really substandard electric cars, like Mercedes, like, BMW, all these guys, Audi, that really are putting out these products that don't live up to their own brand, or even a 2012 Tesla Model S, for example. Yeah. And you look at it and you go, that's going to open those people's minds to electric cars. And then they're going to go shop for an electric car, and they're quickly going to realize that Tesla is your best bet, basically. Unless there are cases where it's not, but in general, it's going to win, 9 times out of 10 when you look at like price and features and utility and all those kind of things. So it's a funny thing, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how we ended up buying it, was because we found a used one for half price, essentially.
Right.
Because there was no way I was going to spend that much money on it. Like, I don't like cars in general. I've never wanted to spend money on a car. Only when we got that did it actually, the math kind of work out, where I'm like, oh, this is actually like a good deal.
And then you're like, the Teslanomics here are amazing.
No,
and
that
set
was
everything in motion for you.
Yeah, that was a thing that came up much later.
I'll tell you what. Why don't we do? Why don't they just? But before we do that, let's do a sponsorship real quick. Why don't they just? And the rest of this whole show really sponsored by Skillshare. Thanks to Skillshare for supporting our ludicrous future. Hey, it's a new year, and many of you out there, like most people, have some kinds of resolutions or goals for 2020, and if you do have something like that, Skillshare is a great place to start. Skillshare is an online learning platform where you can learn pretty much any freaking thing on the planet. Seriously, if you're curious about it, there's an expert out there who's created an entire course around it on Skillshare. And all you have to do is just sit there in your pajamas and soak it all in. From dog grooming to cooking to business, design, and more. One good place to start might be the Productivity Masterclass by Thomas Frank. Thomas is a YouTuber and productivity expert, and he's developed this class to help you be more organized and make better use of your time. After all, time is the most precious commodity we have, even more precious than Ben's biceps. You can give Skillshare a try for free for 2 months if you sign up at Skillshare.com/OLF. You'll get unlimited access to thousands of classes, and after the free trial, it's only $10 a month for a yearly subscription. Right now, millions of people are learning and growing on Skillshare, so don't get left behind. Go to Skillshare.com/OLF. We'll put the link down in the description below. Go check it out. So today's Why Don't They Just came from A Day Unwired on Twitter, whose photo is kind of interesting. Says, why don't they just remove brakes from Teslas altogether? If an electric motor has near zero reaction time and can take 4,000-pound car from 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds, what can't it do the same vehicle from 60 to 0 in the same time? And so there were lots of people that had some comments on this, including some schmuck named Everyday Astronaut that says, well, that's literally what brake pads are, though. And then some people followed up and somebody said that I wouldn't pick this because it's not end of the world enough. So showed you, Gareth B. Foster. Don't you feel silly? So what do you think? Should we take brakes off of the Tesla? So okay, so yeah, how long ago was it when they made it so that you could like regen brake all the way to 0? That was
pretty recent.
Recent, yeah. So I tried that, and I didn't like it. I wound up going back to the coast and brake at the very end there. But that's just my preference. But obviously, there's still emergency situations when somebody's pulling out in front of you where I don't think the car can just stop, and I don't think that. And I'm not sure about the engineering of regen braking, but I don't think there's any kind of caliper that can just stop the wheels from moving in that kind of situation. So I just removing the brakes just does not sound like a good idea to me personally.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. The thing that I think is a challenge here is when you don't. Okay, so energy is flowing around, and you have kinetic energy because you're moving. And if you use the motor to regen, and to stop how it, does already, that energy has to go somewhere.
Right.
You can't just say, I'm just going to stop. And, so you would either have to do regen, how it does now. And I don't know if that would be that's not the same braking as actual braking. Or as it suggests, the 0 to 60 of 3.2 or whatever, coming the other way, you couldn't just regen that as fast as you could accelerate. I don't believe you would need to add energy to that to slow it down. Then there's a question of what do you do with that excess energy if your battery's at 100%? Because if driving an electric car, when you're at 100%, you can't really, regen is changed. It's just wildly different. So you'd have to figure that out. And all of that equals just a over-engineered solution to something that has just been tried and true forever and is simple. So what would it gain you? It goes back to, I think a lot of our why don't they just are why would they just, right? Like, why would you do that? Like, would it, because the brake pads, because of regen braking, brake pads themselves on electric cars need to be changed hardly ever. So like in my, as we've been talking about, my 2013 Model S, I don't know if it had the original brake pads, but I had it for, almost 4 years, and I never changed the brake pads ever. And they were still, I think when I sold it, they were still at like 60% life. So 3 years, 60% life still, so you don't really have to worry about it. So it's like a very minimal kind of thing. And as you mentioned, it gives you, an added layer. Now, the interesting question that I've heard, I've never heard a great answer, is the emergency brake, which is because these cars don't have emergency brakes, which is ironic because I don't really know what an emergency brake is for. If you think about it, it basically is the thing in most cars that you forget to undo that makes the car smell funny. And in no case have I ever used an emergency brake where I'm like, oh, thank God, because if this were an emergency, this thing would work great. It generally is like not an emergency brake. It's like a backup, maybe in case brake.
Don't you use it for drifting somehow? Like you pull up and you control the car
not something
that
that actually makes you stop, I guess is my point.
Now, I used to have an old Volkswagen Beetle that, you needed the emergency brake for that one.
Was it to stop?
Because it would roll down any hill that you were on. Right.
Yeah. But that's the backup, like whatever. And so if you had an old stick shift, you'd put it in gear, and then the gear wouldn't roll away, right? Because the gear is engaged.
Yeah, and in this particular case, that gear was so worn down, it would often slip out. So I needed the emergency brake for that. But.
So regular car, gear would be engaged, and it wouldn't do that. Well, guess what? In your electric car, the gear's engaged always. Yeah. So it's not going anywhere.
To be honest, when I first started looking into electrics and Teslas and everything, and I realized they didn't have an emergency brake, it was the first car I'd ever had that didn't have one. Well, every car I'd ever had was also a standard transmission. So maybe that has something to do with it. But I thought it was kind of weird, and I felt a little uncomfortable about it. But then I had to kind of be like, but how many times did you actually use it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And the only thing it ever did is you left it on an accident, and it made a funny smell in the car. That's the only, 90% of emergency brake use cases.
Or a valet would pull out the emergency brake, and I didn't realize it, and I would like stall the engine because I didn't know why it wasn't going. And
yeah. In case of an emergency, it's not my first choice. Like, it never didn't really give me that confidence that would be.
You don't have the thought in an emergency to be like, let me reach down and grab this extra brake over here.
Yeah.
I guess if you're a performance driver or something, maybe. But.
Before we go on, let's hear what Tim has to say about this. Why don't they just?
Okay, so why don't they just get rid of brakes on a Tesla? So this is a fun one to think about it from a physics perspective. Well, first off, you don't really want to rely on, the electronics and stuff like that of a motor. What if things were to, it's always a good idea to be able to have a backup of stopping, right? That's never a bad thing, I would say, but that's not the real reason at all. That's because we rely on the motors to get going all the time. So why couldn't we rely on them to stop that? So the question is, why wouldn't you just use, reverse and actually put in electricity to slow the vehicle down? Well, that's less efficient than just using brakes. So don't forget, obviously, if you were to take, so you have a lot of potential energy. The car's moving forward at, we'll say 100 kilometers an hour, 60 mile an hour. It's moving forward, has a lot of potential energy. To slow that down, you need to exert resistance. You need to actually begin to get rid of that potential energy. So you could do that through a few things. You could have the motors go in reverse, but now you're spending energy to actually slow the car down, as opposed to when you let go of the accelerator pedal and it regenerates. What it's doing in that case is it's basically turning the motor into a generator. Now, that's only possible. That's only possible if that electricity has somewhere to go. So I know this is probably, it all stems from the idea that sometimes like when the car is too full, it can't really do regen braking. But the thing is if the battery is full, it physically, because of physics, can't provide a place for that electricity to go. Therefore, there can't be an electric field around the generator. Therefore, the generator can't provide resistance. So if there's nowhere for the electricity to go, if the battery's too full or too cold and can't accept the charge rate, there's nowhere for that electricity to go. There's nowhere for that potential energy to go because there's no resistance in the motor now acting as a generator. So your option, yeah, you could pump electricity from your battery pack back into the motors, and then that could slow you down. But like I said, you'd actually be spending energy. Like that would take energy to do that. Your electrical energy would reduce your range, as opposed to, using whatever regen's available. If there's not any available, using brake pads is the next option. And then people were saying, well, why don't you create a lot of heat and pump it out into the cooling system and, or throw it out a radiator in the back? Obviously, there's a lot of systems involved in doing something like that, right? So you have to add all these things to take and turn the, heat, energy and dissipate it out safely. And in order to produce heat, the best way to do that is through friction. So now you just invented the brake pad, because that's literally all brake pads are. Brake pads are literally just something that take the kinetic energy of the wheel, they provide friction, and providing that friction, that clamping force, that stopping force, you're introducing heat, and it radiates off of the disc rotor. Congratulations, you just reinvented the brake system, but now it's way more complicated, because if you're trying to do anything like that, you're just adding all these extra pieces. So that's why you don't just get rid of brakes, because there's really nothing wrong with them. And you're certainly not going to be saving energy if you're trying to actually use reverse power to slow the vehicle down.
Another thing about the regen braking as the only kind of braking, it's like, 3 seconds. If you're in a parking lot and somebody pulls out right in front of you, that's a long time.
Yeah.
To stop.
Yeah, fair point. And it wouldn't. Yeah, it does make sense. Because also, just the way that works is not the same, know? Yeah. So thanks for the question, though.
Plus the brake industry would never let that happen, because they would lose so much money. Yeah, we're in the big break. We're beholden to big break.
Is that a thing? You always hear about the lobby, the milk lobby, the oil lobby, things like that. Are brakes a thing that you need a lobby for? Is it like, we need to make sure that cars have brakes? Like they have to go convince politicians.
It's in the law now, so somebody did it.
I know, but do they still donate to a lobbying group, or are they like, give me that job? Like, I'm the guy that lives in Washington, gets paid $500,000 a year to convince people they need brakes in their car. I
kind of wonder if because people were so resistant back in the day to seatbelts. I still remember when people moaned about having to put a seatbelt on. I wonder if at some point, like way back when, it was like, I gotta have a brake on this thing. I'm gonna have to stop.
Yeah, and remember when seatbelts would automatically like come on in front of you or whatever?
Oh,
yeah. So that's like, oh look, it's so easy now. It saves you. How much more convenient do we need things to be? I'm just
with all the automation inside the Tesla, they couldn't do that. Come on.
Yeah, seriously, guys, get it together. I don't know how this might be the last car they make.
Right.
We'll see.
So what you got working on for the coming week?
Ooh, next week I have a treat, because Tesla let me borrow a Performance Model S Raven edition, the brand new one.
Oh, I've seen some
for my CES trip. And I've never actually reviewed a Tesla Model S before. So I always talk about the numbers, which is what I do, but I thought it would make sense to actually just give it a full review and talk about all the features and everything, now that we have kind of the latest and greatest. I so badly want to title the video 2020 Tesla Model S, but I know that that's not a thing and people would be so furious. But I know the general public that don't understand that there aren't model years would be like, oh, I want to see that, right? So I even thought about like titling it that in the very beginning of the video, being like, I know, I'm sorry, but I had people that don't know that about Tesla assume that that's what it is, so that's what they would want to see, That's the trick of like doing something that the algorithm will want to share,
right?
Versus the actual, like, as Mark Rober used to say, like, I get you with the clickbait and then I hit you with the science, right? It was like the same idea of like some wild sensational title, but then like really substantive good video. Anyway, so that's what's coming out next week is my Model S Performance Raven Edition review.
Okay, so the Raven has one motor up front, two in the back. Is that the deal?
No, that's the Plaid motor.
Oh, okay.
That's not out yet. The Raven one is the new suspension. So they changed quite a few things on the interior from the older versions. A lot of it's very just aesthetic looking. But the new actual Raven thing is this adaptive sport type suspension. So the faster you're going, the more cornering, it just tightens up and does all that, kind of automatically. And so we already know about air suspension, which Model 3s don't have, but S and X have had for a while. So it's kind of like that, but it's just a better version of it. It's ironic that like that's the big thing. The biggest difference I noticed in it between my old 2013 edition and other 2016, 2017, 2018 Model S's that I've driven, and this, the 2020 Model S, is the computer. That is the biggest, like of all the changes from the very first one to the latest one, the biggest difference I could really feel and notice was the MCU, the actual computer that runs the kind of entertainment stuff. Yeah, that's a big difference. So, yeah. So that's it for me. What about you?
Well,
what other dystopian?
Right. On the note of the whole get you with the clickbait and then hit you with the science kind of thing or whatever. So last week's video on Thursday was the Panama Canal one.
Yeah.
And I titled it "The Deadliest Strip of Land in the World" because like 35,000 people died making this thing over the years. And of course I had a lot of nitpickers in the comments that were like, well, there's this road in Russia that Stalin's gulag were, forcing people to work and millions of people died and all that. And so I was kind of like, yeah, but that's still to me, like I was not counting military campaigns. Obviously there's some trenches in World War I that were probably worse than the Panama Canal, but obviously a lot of people are going to die there because that's what you're there for.
Yeah.
But the Panama Canal was just a construction project, and all these people died doing it, and they weren't forced to do it. They were just being paid probably very little. But anyway, so yeah, I stand by my statement.
Well, and you I thought you mentioned that a little bit too, that you explicitly didn't talk about military stuff. Didn't you mention that in the video?
So okay, the Burma Road, I forget the full name of it, but it was the one on the bridge on the River Kwai that story was based off of. So supposedly a lot more people died there, but again, it was like forced labor. It was POWs that were just being worked to death, and they weren't being fed and everything because it was just fodder,
Right.
So I was like, let's put an asterisk by it and count this anyway. But
well, and I was interested that you mentioned Nicaragua because that when I was down there a few years ago was when that Chinese company was doing that thing. They were like signing the deal or whatever, and there was big protests and stuff like that. But
really?
People were not stoked on it. But it does make a lot of sense just if you were to like. If you're playing, what's the Risk or whatever, the big game where you like have the world, you're like, let's build a bridge. Like that probably makes sense because the Lake Nicaragua is like so big. It's like a third or 2/3 of that section of land that it would be far easier to do that just because it was already, kind of naturally like that. Yeah.
I mean, according to my reading and stuff before I made that video, it sounds like the whole thing kind of fell through. So.
Yeah, which I think, I don't know, I'm happy about. We don't need more like giant trenches through this natural beautiful land.
Well, it was interesting to me, and I always learn so much whenever I make these videos about things I never really thought about before. But like the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, like they're in competition with each other.
Mm.
And a lot of times it makes just as much sense to go one direction as the other. It's just this way might be a little bit cheaper because the Suez Canal has smaller fees than the Panama Canal. So they're constantly like going back and forth and like fighting each other. And there's other routes too. I mean, I was saying in there that it's starting to make more sense to just build bigger cargo ships and go around because you can get more, economically. It makes sense. It's actually really fascinating. It's something I never really thought about it.
And you pointed out too, I remember the size of ships is largely based on the Panama Canal. I guess you could say it had a strong influence on how those things were constructed. I think that there is so much of that in our world that we don't think about, like why a car is the size it is. In fact, I have a video coming out in 2 weeks. I've got like too many videos already shot. But it talks about trucks, and I go into why we love trucks here in this country. And a lot of it is about the infrastructure that we built for World War II, where roads and everything were made big and wide and straight for shipping things around the country, which lent very well to trucks being made.
Right.
And so that's why cars and things like that are just so much bigger here. And so it's kind of like the similar deal. We're like, oh, well, that's what the infrastructure kind of asked for or supported. So let's do that, Yeah.
I mean, cars are smaller in European cities because the roads are about that wide.
Exactly. Right. They have to be. I think there's so many, it's really interesting. Just so much of our environment is a way for a reason. Yeah. And we don't think about those reasons. We just like accept that that's, how tall a couch should be or something. Right. It was probably like the king was a certain height and that was the perfect height for him. So all couches have to be made that way. Yeah. Or, things like that. Or why in Spain they talk with a lisp, because the king or emperor or whatever had a lisp and you didn't want to make him feel embarrassed. So you had to speak with a lisp too. And then now the entire country, millions of people, that's how they speak.
This sounds like the next Malcolm Gladwell book.
Yeah, it's weird. It's the the ripple effect thing. Like one small little thing that has these massive implications on millions of people's lives.
Right. Well, so next week's video, it's basically the most extreme objects in the universe. I'm just kind of like looking at the hottest, the brightest, the biggest things in the universe and comparing them, and it's just kind of a fun list of how crazy the universe actually is.
What about the smallest?
Well, we're still trying to figure that out, I guess, aren't we?
Yeah.
Quark.
Yeah. Is there a theory in your studies? I don't know about that video, but in that vein of it almost appears to me a little bit that that it's like the Russian doll almost. So like, could our entire universe as we know it just be like one atom in another larger universe, right?
So and theorize that,
right? Like I would love to dig into those kind of theories, because you could look at it, because you as we go down from our world into molecular stuff, into quantum stuff, the same shapes and things tend to appear, the same patterns tend to go over and over again. So I kind of does that go the other way, where we're literally like, I don't know, on someone's toenail and some other,
Well, I had to stop at universe because there's always the possibility of a multiverse and that kind of thing. It's like you can just kind of keep going theoretically. Yeah. So it's like, all right, well, let's just stop here.
Yeah. It is a little weird, I think, that mainstream science believes in things like that, or that they
multiverse?
Yeah.
Well, it's not a belief thing. It's just a theory. And they're trying to find the evidence to bear it out, but it's not.
But to be called a theory is significant.
Hypothesis.
Okay, so if it's a hypothesis, yeah, somebody just made it up. But anyways,
I'm gonna get comments on that. I can tell already.
It's just interesting that that's where it goes, and you're like, really? That seems pretty woo-woo. There's like, There's some woo-woo out there, but they're like
Well,
seriously exploring it.
So I guess if you wanted to go the other direction and say what's the smallest, like you said before, I guess the smallest theoretical thing would be like the strings in string theory,
Right.
which we don't know for sure they are, but it's like at the Planck length, which is just insanely small. Like you get down to like a quark and then keep going by like 50 orders of magnitude, you finally get down to the Planck length. Don't quote me on that. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. Looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, all right.
Think we did it?
Speaking for Tim, thank you guys for watching. Catch us at Fully Charged Live in Austin if you're going to be there. We're going to be hanging out. It'll be a lot of fun. And I guess we'll see you next time in our Ludicrous
Future.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you like what we do and you want to kind of help get it out there, you can give us a nice review on any of your podcast streaming platforms, whichever one you use. That kind of helps get it out there. Also, we do have a Patreon set up, so you can join us there at patreon.com/OurLudicrousFuture. You can get your name in the credits, meet a whole other group of like-minded people. It's a lot of fun. We do appreciate it. We'll see you there.